Hi, everybody. It's Father Josh, and it's time for another road trip pilgrimage. Today, we're going to go to a must-see in the Diocese of Manchester. We're going to go to Manchester and visit the Cathedral, St. Joseph Cathedral. I understand it's just undergone some renovation and some painting, and I'm really excited to go check it out. So let's go. Okay, here we are. We made it to the cathedral. Let's see if Father Jason, the pastor and rector, is here.
1 minute later.
Oh,
hey, Father Josh.
Father Jason, good to see
This
you.
is a big church.
That's right. We got a lot to see.
I heard the knock. I came running down the aisle. Come on in. It's great to have you.
Great.
Okay, welcome to the cathedral.
This is such a huge and beautiful church, but that's not what it takes to be a cathedral, right? Like, what is it about this that makes it a cathedral?
Sure, yeah, it has nothing to do with the size of the church. It has to do about one thing in particular, and that one thing is the chair that you see here, the bishop's chair, which is called the Cathedral. And from the Cathedra, you get the word cathedral.
Okay,
so it's really the house for the Cathedra.
The place where the bishop's chair is.
The place where the bishop's chair is.
Yeah.
Right. And that chair is pretty significant, as you know. No one sits in that chair except for the bishop.
Yeah.
And any other bishop that he allows to sit in it.
Yeah.
But no priest sits in that chair.
Yeah.
No priest sits in that chair.
Why don't you have a seat? Okay. No, not in that chair. Not in that chair.
No priest.
Only the bishop sits in that chair.
Yeah.
But no priest sits in that chair.
Yeah. And is there anything else that kind of marks this space as the bishop's church?
Sure, yeah. So in particular, the bishop's coat of arms. So above the cathedra are the bishop's coat of arms that are combined with the diocesan coat of arms. And the bishop does come quite often. He comes at least once a month to celebrate a Sunday Mass. And then he celebrates most of the holy days here. But the one way that people know the bishop is here to celebrate Mass is the seventh candle on the altar. No other parish church has 7 candles on the altar, just the cathedral. And so when that center candle is lit, the people in the congregation know the bishop is here to celebrate Mass.
Okay. So was this church always a cathedral then?
No, it wasn't always a cathedral. It was built as a parish church, and it was completed in 1869. So it was an extension of St. Anne Church right up the street. There were a lot of Irish immigrants here in Manchester, and so they outgrew that church, and the pastor, Father McDonald, built St. Joseph's Church right down the street from St. Anne's. And it was a little smaller than it is now. It ended just about right here where you see the window of St. Paul. So the church didn't have this big sanctuary at the time.
You mentioned it was really built to serve the Irish immigrants. Is there more things in this church that kind of have that Irish influence?
I think the architect was Patrick Keeley. He was a very well-known and respected architect of the time. And so he was the one who designed this church before it became a cathedral. So the Irish immigrants who helped build this church, they would work, of course, in these textile mills. And then they would come up here. It was known to be that they were working sort of in this drudgery of textile mill work. And then they would come here and look up and build this beautiful bell tower, which is 170 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
So they would go from looking down to looking up.
That's right, yeah. Which is such a beautiful thing for a church to do, right? We're supposed to go from our regular lives and then come to the church and, like, it reminds us to look up to God.
Right, and this Gothic architecture does that.
Yeah.
It's all about arches,
Yeah.
and arches pointing up. So wherever you look in this church, you'll see an arch that points up, whether it's the windows, whether it's the arches down the center nave, whether it's the sanctuary, whatever it is, like the architecture just keeps pointing up. And that's where, we want to go.
Yeah. So it's like the whole church speaks to us of the journey to God, the journey to heaven.
Exactly, yeah.
So how then did this church become the cathedral of the diocese?
Yeah, good question. It was in 1884 that the Diocese of Manchester was created. The whole state of New Hampshire used to be part of the Diocese of Portland, Maine. So the number of Catholics was growing in this New England region. So with the new diocese, you need a bishop. And so Father Dennis Bradley was chosen as the first bishop of Manchester, and he happened to be the pastor of St. Joseph's Church here on the east side of Manchester. And of course, he chose St. Joseph's to be the cathedral. And in this window, we see that he also had to make a coat of arms for himself, and he chose Joseph to be the center of the coat of arms, and his motto is Ite ad Joseph, which means go to Joseph.
And so St. Joseph is a special saint, not just for this church,
Right.
but for our diocese.
Right, so St. Joseph is the patron of our diocese, but he's also the universal patron of the church. So from 1884 until 1894, Bishop Bradley was in a huge construction project. He added the sanctuary, the chapel, and also the rectory. So 10 years of building.
So here we are in the sanctuary. Can you tell me a little bit about the altar and the reredos that are here?
Sure. Well, the sanctuary, of course, is the most important part of the church. That's where the Blessed Sacrament is kept in the tabernacle. And in this church, the tabernacle is in this beautiful high altar, or also called a reredos. This beautiful altar was brought into the cathedral a few years ago from a church that closed in Boston, Holy Trinity Church. And the church was also designed by Patrick Keeley, who designed this church. So it very much fit into this Victorian Gothic architecture. And so it really restored the sanctuary to its original glory. So it was a great gift from the Archdiocese of Boston to the Diocese of Manchester.
And it's such a beautiful thing. As you said, it draws everything upwards. So we see these spires reaching up to heaven, and all these points all over it are pointing up to heaven. Up near the top of the reredos, there's 6 angels on either side. And I see more angels down near the tabernacle. And what's the significance of all those angels?
Well, during the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, heaven and earth come together. And so the angels remind us that we join the choir of angels when we are at Mass. Particularly when we sing, we think of the choirs of angels in heaven singing around the throne of God, the Lamb who was slain. And so it's a beautiful image of heaven.
I also notice on this altar there's some glass kind of displays. What's the significance of those?
Right, those beautiful brass things are called reliquaries, and in them are relics of the saints. And again, relics of the saints are very important for us as Catholics. We venerate them because of the holy men and women that they are part of. And so these relics connect us to the saints in heaven.
Isn't there some sort of connection to having like a relic as part of an altar? Is that...
Sure. In the early church in Rome, Christians would celebrate Mass on the tombs of holy men and women who had died for the faith. And so it kind of brings the tomb to us. But actually, speaking of tombs, at the cathedral, we do also celebrate Mass on tombs, because right underneath the altar is the crypt where our first 5 bishops are buried. Yeah, so now we're below the altar. This is the door that leads into the crypt. And the next door into the crypt. I'll get this one. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord,
And let perpetual light shine upon them.
may their souls and the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen.
We'd be remiss if we don't point out Deacon Eric, the porter and the keeper of the keys.
Yes. Hello. Deacon Eric, you can lead us up to the choir loft.
As you know, choir lofts are like the thing we always have to go check out. And YouTubers.
Yes, sir.
I just love being up here in the choir loft, being able to take in all of these things in the church. There's so much to look at here. There's so many different designs, so many different symbols, so many things that point to higher and greater things, that point to heaven. And it's even great to be able to be closer to these trusses, the bees we see emblazoned. We even see there's a couple of different ones back here that have ravens on them instead. So what's the significance of ravens?
Well, we wanted to sneak something in about the bishop, since Bishop Labashi was the bishop when we did this restoration. And in his coat of arms, he has a raven, which is because of the seminary he went to, St. Meinrad's. And the raven is very Benedictine.
And ravens speak to...
Can you say something about the raven?
Oh yeah, you're right. Speaking of St. Meinrad, Deacon Eric, tell us about ravens.
So the ravens come from a story in St. Benedict's life when some of his monks actually tried to poison him at one point in time, and so they snuck poison into his wine, and as he was about to drink from that chalice, the raven came down and knocked it out of his hand, and he knew because of that it was a sign from God that his monks had tried to poison him, and so he survived because the raven saved him.
Oh, change is hard.
Yeah.
Also, ravens also speak to the Old Testament when Elijah was running for his life and ravens came and fed him to give him strength for his journey too. I love that these windows, well, first of all, they're so musically oriented, musically inclined. I love that it has the first line in the creed in one of the windows, Credo in unum Deum. What is Sorsum Corda?
Lift up your heart.
That's right.
From the preface.
Yeah. Harp, we have some violin-looking thing. We have a trombone.
And the bongos.
That's really fun.
You won't hear bongos at the cathedral.
No. Well, we should go play the timpani. I love it. We have to sneak through the back maze to find our way to the chapel. Secret passages. So after finding our way through the labyrinth back from the cathedral, we find ourselves in the chapel. So why was this chapel here? What can you tell us about the chapel?
Sure. Most cathedrals have Blessed Sacrament chapels. And so when Bishop Bradley was building to make this a cathedral, he added the sanctuary, but he also built this beautiful Blessed Sacrament chapel, which is a miniature of the cathedral.
This chapel is a mini cathedral, basically. Right. But one thing I do notice, like in the sanctuary, it also has like a beautiful high altar, a reredos, but there is no other altar there. So what's that about?
We have a beautiful Carrara marble altar that was installed when this chapel was built. And you'll notice that there's no freestanding altar like you would see in most Catholic churches. So we still use the original high altar, and celebrating Mass on the high altar is called ad orientem, facing the east. And so the priest faces the same direction as the people when he offers the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And one of the most beautiful parts is turning around after the consecration and holding the host with the chalice and proclaiming those beautiful words, "Behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sins of the world." So there's that revealing when the priest turns around of what he has been doing at that altar.
I love that image of the priest leading the people in prayer, this idea of let's all face God together and speak to him together.
Right, and facing east, even though this altar doesn't face east, it's a liturgical east. And the sun rises from the east, but we also expect Christ to return from the east. And so we're waiting for the return of the Lord. And of course, at Mass, the Lord becomes present in the Mass when the bread and wine are turned into the body and blood of Christ.
The body of Christ does rise in that moment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. So it's a beautiful image.
So I understand there's a couple of really special windows in this chapel.
Right. Well, it's called the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. So if you look at the windows, they're all Eucharistic, but there are two in particular that are very personal to this chapel and to the cathedral. So let's go take a look at those. So the first window I'd like to point out is this window here. The priest giving First Communion to this young boy is Father MacDonald. And Father MacDonald built St. Joseph Church. And he's giving First Holy Communion to this young boy whose name is Dennis Bradley. And his mother is looking over, watching him receive his First Holy Communion. So that young boy, Dennis Bradley, becomes Father Dennis Bradley, who then becomes Bishop Dennis Bradley, the first bishop of the Diocese of Manchester. So Father MacDonald gave him his First Holy Communion at St. Anne Church, which was Father Bradley's home parish.
Which is what gave birth to St. Joseph Church.
Which gave birth to St. Joseph Church. Father MacDonald built St. Joseph when he was the pastor of St. Anne. And then right across the chapel is the window of an elderly man in bed receiving communion at the end of his life, which is called the Viaticum. And the priest is Father Dennis Bradley giving Viaticum to Father MacDonald at the end of his life. So it's really neat to see how the person giving the last communion to this priest was the person who he gave his First Holy Communion to. And so just that relation of priest and the Eucharist, the beginning of life, the end of life.
That's such a beautiful story. That's amazing.
And so Bishop Bradley, of course, built this chapel, and this is one way how he made it personal to him. And also how he memorialized Father MacDonald, who I'm sure was a great influence on his life and him becoming a priest.
You know, it's such an incredible building and buildings, I suppose. Mm-hmm. It's funny because we kind of have to pick and choose what we're going to look at and talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But being here in the chapel, like this image really struck me. Can you tell us about this image?
Sure. This is the death of St. Joseph, and St. Joseph is the patron of a happy death. And of course, a happy death is to die with Jesus and Mary at your side.
And where did these paintings come from?
The 4 paintings that we have in the cathedral, there are 2 in the sanctuary, in the main cathedral, 2 here in the chapel. They were painted by a brother from St. Anselm Abbey, Father Bonaventure. So about 1904 is when he painted these.
This choir loft is huge. I could see the whole chapel from up here. So, okay, if you don't know to look for this, you might miss it. I know that because I missed it for about 10 years. This is no ordinary lampstand outside of this chapel.
No, I've never seen anything like it, and it's an arm coming out of the church holding a torch. And so we are told that that is the arm of Bishop Bradley himself. And so he's holding the light. And of course, Christ is the light, and Christ, the light, draws people to himself. And so that light is meant to draw people to this church.
That's a great image. The bishop as, you know, the leader of his people, you know, holding that light and drawing people to the true light.
Sure, yeah. So that's the story about that arm.
Once you see it, you won't be able to miss it.
Exactly.
So here outside of the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, I noticed there's this fenced-off area with this beautiful monument. What is this area of the cathedral?
Sure. Well, this area is a memorial to Bishop Bradley to begin with. He wanted to be remembered, and so his successor, Bishop Delaney, built this beautiful Celtic cross, and it was a monument for Bishop Bradley. And then they ended up putting the names of the other bishops on the monument. So it's just a memorial to the bishops. People coming to the chapel are able to remember them.
Mm-hmm. I see there's also some headstones here. What's this area used for?
Sure. Well, the crypt and underneath the altar where the bishops are buried is practically full. There's only one empty spot. And so the other bishops who died more recently are buried here outside the chapel.
It's kind of a beautiful thing to think about the bishop of a place being so connected to the cathedral, connected to the people in that way.
Right, yeah. So even though they died, they are still part of the cathedral. They continue to be here, their remains.
Okay, Father Jason's gone, so we're gonna really get a chance to explore now. Let's see what's down here. I don't know. What if he catches us? Let's go anyway.
What are you doing?
Let's see what's in here. Oh wow, this is all these chalices and monstrances. This is incredible. This is a treasure trove in here.
What are you doing?
Oh, there's a little space behind the altar. Let's go see what they keep back here.
What are you doing?
Well, Father Jason, thank you so much for showing us around and giving this great opportunity to explore the cathedral and see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and just learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And our first tour was at St. Patrick's, which is the mission from the cathedral. And so it's good to have you here. And I hope your neck it won't be too sore after all the looking up that we have done today.
We've been gazing up to heaven all day long.
All day long.
Well, what a great day this was to be able to visit St. Joseph's Cathedral in Manchester and to take in all this beautiful work that's been done, this new painting, this restoration, and just to talk about the history of this church, but more than that, what this church means, for the diocese and for all the priests who have been ordained there and for all the people who have been able to come and celebrate so many sacraments there. And even just being able to talk with Father Jason, this idea of the church as being this consecrated holy place, this place where heaven meets earth. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to think about, and the fact that we get to experience that anytime we go and visit a church, that we get to visit someplace holy, someplace that calls our minds to heaven and in a sense is even a part of heaven. It's really a beautiful thing. So really, really grateful we got to visit the cathedral today. Thanks to all of you for coming along on this road trip, on this pilgrimage. And please like the video and share it and subscribe to the channel. And remember, wherever your road trips take you, why not make it a pilgrimage? Safe travels, everybody.
And so in 1884,
Okay, so then, this is my cathedra.
Father Josh is on detention now.
on detention.
Look at this. I don't know what to say. I thought it was a metronome. I'm just worn out. I think we got to get out of here. Here, let's go.
Hey, where are you going?